Hello and welcome to our presentation. I start with the current situation. We are still affected by the chip crisis. The warehouses are still full, and due to the political and technological changes and development, there is no demand. And the revenues declined sharply in 24, and we will see a decline also in 25. The big EMS, they had, after the Corona decline, the most effect and the big win from 21 to 23, but they lost most in 24. The smaller EMS has a better stand, but even there now they're going down. And what we also will see is a layoff of a huge number of people, especially in Central Eastern Europe, but to that I come later. These are the revenues from 2013 to 24. I say something about our work. We work with primary numbers. We get the data directly from the EMS companies, or we take it out from the company registration. The numbers for 24 are an extrapolation because not every EMS has given the figures to the company register, so not all the annual reports are in, but we have now data for 87% of the EMS market. And you see here a stable growth with the Corona year inside, but a stable growth. And now the decline of 7% for whole Europe. We have identified in our database more than 2,200 companies concerning to 1,860 legal entities, and they concerning to 1,816 companies. And every time we show this foil, she is outdated. Yeah, because there are ongoing so much changes, acquisitions or closures, so that every time this is not the correct number. But what you can see is that most EMS we have in Germany, followed by France, UK, Italy, and then Poland is the fifth biggest EMS market in kind of numbers in Europe. We split up our analysis in Western and Eastern European. This has nothing to do with the political view. It is due to the fact that there is a different development in these countries. So in Western European countries, we have a lot of differentiation in revenue groups, a lot of small and medium-sized companies. And on the other hand, we only have less than a third of companies in Eastern European, is 523 to 1,802. But of that, more than 35 are non-European daughter companies and production side of a global EMS. And in some, we have 190 EMS founded or acquired by Western or international EMS, included with the 35 I talked before. And on the other hand, we have 149 very small EMS companies in Central Eastern Europe with less than 2 million revenues. And of that, 91 has less than 1 million revenue. Here you see the split between the revenues from Western and Eastern European. And after I thought 2018, 2019, that the Eastern will climb over the Western revenues because they already was a little bit higher. After the Corona crisis, the revenues for the Western companies grow more than for the Eastern companies. Here in 2023, we have a decline of 2% for Eastern. This is due to the fact that Jabil has a huge decline, and Jabil is a very big player for the Eastern part, so that this was this impact on the whole market. For 24, we have a decline of 9.7 for Western European and 3.8 for Eastern European. But if we take out the outstanding outliers, and this is mostly Foxconn, who has a big growth due to the demand for data servers and KI and AI, artificial intelligence, then you will see that even Eastern European looks more worse than Western European with 18.9 minus. Here we have now a picture of the headcounts, and there was as even with the revenues, still ongoing growth until 23. But now we have a big cut, a big breakdown, and we have a loss of 7,300 jobs. And most of them in Eastern Germany, in Eastern European countries, due to the fact that the companies from the Western European countries, it's harder to lay down people in their home countries, so it's easier to lay down people in the Eastern European countries. You see that as well if we have a look on the headcount reduction by countries. In percentage numbers, Bulgaria has the highest decline with 15% of the total workers in their country working in the EMS branch. But in numbers, it is Poland with 1,817 people, followed by Romania with 1,346, and the Czech Republic with 7,500. But it's not only the European countries who has the reduction, even in the other countries happening things as well. So France, for example, had already a huge reduction of 1,000 people in 2023. The ranking of the 25 European EMS in Europe. There is not such a big movement at the moment. There was a lot of movement before, and the negative growth of all these bigger ones is followed by a lot of acquisition, because the big stock listed companies, they have to grow, and they can only grow by acquisitions. A natural growth don't give the same figures that they give as targets for the next years. And next year, the list will look totally different because this week we had a spectacular acquisition. Hansa, a Swedish public listed company who's number 11 on this list, took over the German BMK group, number 3 in Germany, and number 16 here on the list. And they say with that acquisition, there will be the biggest stock-listed company and also one of the biggest EMS companies in Europe. It was information from Monday or Tuesday, so we had not the time to verify that yet, but we will do that. Yeah, other like Secor, Connect Group, they're also all public listed companies who also acquired a lot. Coming to CEE and Poland again, this is a chart with the revenue shares of all Central Eastern European companies. And you can see that there are only small shifts over the years. So the Czech Republic has the biggest market share from all Central Eastern companies, followed by Hungary, Poland, Romania, and a little bit, Slovakia and a little bit Bulgaria. But the rest of the other companies are not don't play a role in this revenue share. This is a figure we presented very new for this presentation, and it shows the comparison of the foreign-controlled companies versus domestic companies in Central Eastern Europe. And you can see that there is a big dominance of this is the red one, the foreign-controlled companies in Romania and Moldova already in figures. The most domestic companies you find in Poland, in Slovenia, and in Macedonia. But if you change the pictures to the revenue share of these companies in Central Eastern Europe, you get a totally other and very extreme picture. In nearly all these companies, you have a big share of foreign companies without Moldova and Croatia. But for both companies, it's due to the fact that there's a really less number of companies in total. And the domestic companies are normally companies with less revenues, and this is why in revenue share, the foreign-controlled companies take this huge share in this view. The top 30 in Eastern Europe, so the top 10 in the Central Eastern Europe countries have a market share of 64.6%. This is less than we showed the same figure for 23. There it was more than 70%. So it was a decline in the market share of this top 10. And we have 429 legal entities belonging to 383 companies. If you have a look on the picture, Foxconn is with 40% revenue the massive biggest player in total Central Eastern Europe. And if you take Flex with it, both companies have more than 50% of the revenue share of all Central Eastern European countries. In this list, you find only a few companies from located from in Central Eastern Europe. This is two big ones: Videoton from Hungary at place 4 and Fideltronic at place 9. And then you have Elrad at place 20, and that's all. The rest are all Western or international EMS companies. A look to Poland. I make a new view, not scale. It's the spatial distribution of all EMS companies in Poland. As I said, we have 129 legal entities in Poland, and you see there are EMS clusters here in Warsaw, in Gdansk, in Wrocław, and in Krakow. This makes no difference if you have a company from domestic or foreign controlled. They both are concentrating on these 4 big cities. The next ranking list, and normally we bring it at the end of the country presentation, but I start with that because you have to have a look on the name in this list of the top 20, because they're playing a role on the charts I show after that. Here in Poland, the top 10 has a market share of more than 80%. You have seen that in the chart I showed you as well. And but we have a huge variety. We have 129 companies and only 100 entities and only 127 different companies. But Flex and Jabil have also here a huge part of the total share. Polish companies are Fideltronic in place 3. And then if you have a look on the top 10 to top 20, we will find more like Elhurt, Interphone, Esselplum, Eltem, or Tierstronic. Even for Poland, you can see a growth in revenues is excluded of the breakdown for the corona, but this was for every country the same picture. And after corona, we had a really rebound and a really growth, double-digit growth in Poland here. But now it's followed by a double-digit decline. And Tech Day published 3 weeks ago, figures as well of the revenues here in Poland, and they had a number of minus 11.1, but only for Polish companies. The 10% more decline here is due to the fact of all the big Western European countries. From the 20 in the list, only Technisat has a growth. All the other companies had a decline, and sometimes double-digit decline. And this influenced these figures very heavily. Same picture in Polish zloty. You nearly see the same development. It's even more worse in the own currency, but it's nearly the same picture. How it's with this change in revenues. We have a look and make it in different types of groups, like a plus of 0 to 10% or a minus 0 to 10%. These are also the groups that you will find the most companies in. In general, half of the companies here in Poland has lower revenues and half of the companies have higher revenues. But if you look then which number of revenues they represent, you see that you will find in the companies who had a growth only a small number of revenue share. Yeah, we're talking about 459 million, and on the other hand, we have more than 3 billion, which these companies represent. And on the growing side, you have more the small ones, and on the other side, you have more the big ones. And this you see also here when we analyzed it in winners and losers by revenue size. And here you see that all the big companies, bigger than 20 million or 50 million, they had more decline than growth. And on the other hand, if you're going to your left side, then you see that the smaller ones, they was the winners and they had a grow in the last year. Yeah, here you see the number of employees. I already told you that we had this loss of more than 1,800 jobs. And this is what you see here. Grow before, the biggest number we had in 23 was 23,000, more than 23,000 people, and now we are down to 21,000. Revenue per head, it looks a little bit better in combination of the revenues combined with less jobs. The revenue per head looks better than the revenues itself. And now I left over to Christoph.
Hello. So we heard a lot about 2024 Europe and Poland and so on. So what about 2025 actually? And to find out where we are at in 2025 and where we will likely be at the end of 2025, what we did is a half-year survey actually of the EMS in Europe. And this half-year survey has participating 225 legal entities actually. And those companies estimate a revenue of 11 billion. So this is quite a share of the market which participated in our survey. And here you can see, okay, how the participants are split over Europe by revenue actually. And this on the down right side, a little bit of the German participants, which is the biggest group. And what we always do is we split between companies bigger, 50 million actually, and companies smaller, 50 million, to have a better differentiation between those. And bigger 50 million, 60 companies, 75% of the revenue, and the smaller 50 million, 164, representing 24.3% of the revenues of our half-year survey, which we did at the beginning of July. And in a year-over-year for the first half, the big ones declined 6.6% and the small one 12% year-over-year for the first half, actually. To give you more detail, so this is a lot of detail actually about from our half-year survey. Here you see the groups that we have: Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Belgium, France, other Western Europe, Central Eastern Europe with 23 companies reporting. We also included some public EMS in here with a total of 225 companies participating in our survey actually. And what is important here to know is the very right column. So this is the change 2025 expected to 2024. And those numbers are actually quite accurate because what they estimate, these are numbers which are already in their books. So what we see for Germany, minus 5.9%, Austria minus 5.4%, but in Switzerland, Belgium, Netherlands, France, and other Western, we see positive momentum actually, even double-digit growth here in France for 2025 compared to 2024. And for Central Eastern Europe, we see a minus 4.4% for Central Eastern Europe. And this gives you the overview a little more for the eye. So this is the first half year 2024, then the development to the second half year, then half year over half year, first half year 2025, and this is first half year to second half year 2025. You see, okay, minus 10 in total, then slight increase in total, plus 2.8, and then plus 1.4%. And again, the countries, Germany had a big drop from the first half to the second year, and then it stays quite stable. Austria, minus 10.6, plus 4 here, minus 7.2, up and down a little bit. And when we look here at Central Eastern Europe, we have a minus 6.4% that we have, and then as plus 0.2 and minus 2.6%, again, actually. And what we can see here is we did not only look at revenues and the revenue estimation, but we also look into the order backlog, which you can see on the left, and the change in inventories, as this gives you more detail into what is happening actually. And when you look at the left side, the change in order backlog total, so this is in total the order backlog for the first half year 2025 minus 2.4%, for Central Eastern Europe minus 1.8%, and in Switzerland you see some growth. And with the inventory levels in total, we see minus 6.6%, which is actually good. So we had a very, very high inventory levels at the end of 2024 and the years above, because the companies built a lot of inventory and they were able to decrease the inventory in total by minus 6%, in the DACH region even minus 11.1%. And now a more detailed view to Central Eastern Europe. Here it's important to know, okay, the reporting group is only, I say, only 23 companies. However, the revenues that they have in the first half year 2025, this is around €1 billion actually. And what is very interesting to see here is the book-to-bill ratio. So this one is the B2B book-to-bill. So this is 1.0, and for the bigger ones, and for the smaller one, it's 0.85, which gives us a total book-to-bill of 0.98. The order backlog decreased minus 1.8%. For the small, it's quite big, and the inventory actually increased, but I guess there was some outlier in there. And what's now interesting, we saw this very big decline in 2024, but and still a forecast for 2025 for minus 4.4%. But those companies, they do forecast a very strong growth of around 10% in 2026 to 2025 actually, which hopefully will happen. And as I mentioned earlier, inventory is a big topic. So inventory increased since 2020, 2021 very much. So the companies had a lot of orders from the EMS market. This was also driven because the customers were afraid that they will not get product. So therefore they ordered a lot. We used the word bullwhip effect for this, and we will tell a little bit about this effect later. But what you can see here is that in percentage of revenue, this has decreased a little bit. If you look, for example, okay, CEE is an outlier, but Germany, Austria, in percentage of revenue. They decreased the order backlog, all the countries, but this is always in percentage of revenue. And as you know, the revenues have decreased very much, so the relationship has changed. And in absolute change, this is this line here, absolute change, this was even bigger, so minus 12.1% reduction in inventory, which is very good because there is a baseline of 15% actually from 2015 to 2019, and this is where the companies should be to be healthy actually. So there is still some way to go, but this is actually caused this situation that the revenue declines so much. And now this is the prognosis from the survey actually. So we asked the participants of the survey how they do see the 2025 in red and the 2026 in blue. However, we have to be a little careful here because we think that they have been a little bit too optimistic here. So for example, as I mentioned earlier, CEE minus 4.4 for 2025 and plus 10.4 for 2026. A similar picture is shown for Germany, minus 5.9 and plus 16.8 even, and so on for the whole Germany, Austria, Switzerland, plus 14% for 2026. But as I said, yes, this is not like real numbers in the books. This is expectation. We have to be careful if this is really happening. And now what you can see here is, so to say, our estimation here. Now we do not only have 2024, but we also included 2025 and 2026 here. And for 2025, for the total European market, we see a minus of 1.4% and a slight increase. So for 2026, which will then be better. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. Exactly. Let's see. And now if we look more into detail here, that is actually quite interesting, I would say, because when we compare the situation to the past, we can learn quite a lot and better understand where the market development came from and also better understand where the market is going to go into the future. And here interesting is, okay, 2013 to 2019, we had a pretty stable situation with 4.9 actually growth. And when we lay into this area here, this line, this graph in there, like this, with the 4.9%, then we see, okay, the market developed quite differently in this time actually, because we did not have with the orange or brown columns this stable movement, but we had this steep increase in 2022 actually, peaking in 2023, and then a sharp decline in 2024, and then going back to the line, so to say, in 2025 and for 2026 actually. And this is caused by different factors actually. One that I mentioned earlier is this, so what we call bullwhip effect. So the companies ordered a lot because they were afraid that they do not get enough for their end customers actually. So there was also the chip situation that we had after the Corona crisis, which drove this as well. And a very high demand, like after Corona, that the people tried to spend money, which also drove this growth here. But my colleague Mareike earlier said, okay, in these numbers, especially for CEE, this is the total European market. And there is also the big Foxconn companies in there, which have 2.5 billion euros of revenue actually. And this is like the picture with all the companies. If we exclude those Foxconn companies here, this decline, that's the wrong one, this decline here is even sharper, which I will show you on the next slide. So we do not only have a 7% decline if we exclude those three Foxconn companies, we have an even sharper decline, which even shows more stronger this bullwhip effect that I spoke about. And this effect here is what we call like this bullwhip effect actually, the 7% here. The 7% here, including the companies, the Foxconn companies, which are very much driven by the AI data center trend. And if we exclude those and look at the rest of the market, we even have a decline of minus 13%. So the market decreased quite significantly from this very high level that we saw. And now we are recovering slightly actually, but there are several factors in there, not only this bullwhip effect that come into, that we need to take into consideration actually to understand where we are at and where we are going to head to. And when I say what factors there are, you all read the newspapers. For example, in Germany, automotive industry is doing very bad. German economy, for example, doing not very well. There have been a lot of layoffs actually over the last times. Then the aerospace and defense industry with the political situation is another picture. That's a positive momentum for the industry. So we will take afterwards, to better understand where we are at in the future development, a look into those different industries and market segments to really understand the market. So this is a detailed slide on Germany. On the left-hand side, this is an industrial production, and you can see, okay, in June 2025, this really declined here. So there is a lot of decline in industrial production in Germany, and some headlines here. So the Volkswagen Group plans to reduce labor by 25%. Ford in Cologne announced layoffs. Miele moves production of washing machines to Poland from Germany. Knorr-Bremse moves 2/3 of production from Dresden to Poland, actually. Bosch and Continental are scaling back. BASF goes to China. Rank, the arms company, does production in the United States. So many major German manufacturing companies are moving production out of Germany due to, yes, of course, high energy costs, bureaucracy, competitive pressure, and especially, as you know, in automotive, in electronics and industrial goods, that is what's driving that. And interesting number, 22% of German companies consider moving production. So that's not very good for the German market. So here the DACH region to show you. Also here what we can see is this steep increase that we had from 21 to 23, peaking here, and then it crashed the market, minus 14.3, and for 2025, further decrease of minus 4.6%. And if you look here, from Germany, 2021 to 2025, we started at 8 billion 147, and we will end up at 8 billion 420. So that means 21 to 25, we only had 0.8% growth per year, actually. And speaking of the market, so this is just an overview sector, a slide from 2023, but those segments do not change very fast. How is the market split in general? So we have a lot of automotive in the European market, which 18.7% back then, communication, computer, consumer, the three Cs. Then we have the industrial goods, and we have the medical goods, and then we also have the military aerospace market, or share of the market, which is doomed to increase very much, actually. And to show you which influence the market segment of a company and a country has, I would like to do some comparison here of those two countries. And on the left, you see France. On the right, you see Sweden. And the biggest difference here is the automotive. So the French EMS industry has a very high automotive share. However, Sweden has a very low automotive share. And that means with those industries, the market development is differently. And to give you that in real numbers over time, on the left you see Sweden, below you see France, and on the right top you see the world motor vehicle production. And if you compare France to the world motor vehicle production, you can see, okay, this is moving the same pretty much. So we also see this little dip here in this year that we see on top here. However, Sweden, in comparison, they do not move like this because they don't have the big automotive industry actually, and they're driven by other markets which are performing quite well. And this is from our 2024 annual survey, just to give you the share for Germany. This is broken down into the sectors of the companies who are participating with our surveys for 2024. So not quite actual, but it gives you insight. So big thing in Germany, 20% automotive, industrial, machine measuring and control, medical, and airspace and defense. And you see here, okay, airspace and defense, very small share, but a very high growth is expected. However, the other ones, the measuring control decline back then. So that shows you also for automotive how the industry segments influence the development of the revenues and of the country markets. And here's some highlight. We spoke a lot about the automotive industry. So to tell you a little bit about the drivers here. So on the left, this is an old Mercedes. And on the right, I think this is an Aston Martin. So the cockpits look quite different. And The thing is that we all have this digital cockpits nowadays, and that means different technology, no more buttons, no more plastics in there, but just screens. And many companies cannot participate in that because they do not have the technology. So therefore, they need to build new technology. They need to have a clean room to build that. And those companies who are not able to make this transition, they are struggling at the moment. And the other sector that I mentioned here, this is the certification for the military. And winners are, of course, the EMS companies who supply the defense industry and have the necessary certifications. There is a lot of strength in the UK, in France, actually, in Israel. And also in Poland, there is an upward trend in military. So the Polish government is spending many money to increase the manufacturing industry in defense. And also this money ends up with companies like VP Electronics, Radmor, DGT, Kenbit, and so on. So the Polish government, the Polish industry it gets help from the government to participate and to guarantee a good defense. Now I would like to hand back to my colleague Mareike, who will talk a little bit about M&A.
Yep. Okay. So I told you already when I showed you the top 25 companies in Europe that there are movement in the market, and we analyzed how many acquisitions we had in the last 4.5 years, and the most acquisitions we had in France, mainly to Allianz Electronics, Argon Group, and Group Zenov. In Germany, there happened smaller acquisitions. The biggest one was the buying from Kontron of Kartec, second biggest EMS at this time in Germany. In Switzerland is Cicor, who bought a lot. They bought a lot of Eolan in France, and also a lot of UK. They're the biggest EMS in UK now, and also the biggest defense manufacturer in UK. And in Sweden, this is the public EMS companies as I mentioned before. And we collect them, and you see 45 acquisitions in France, followed by 35 in numbers by Germany and 21 in Sweden. Because of the activity of the Nordic companies, here extra analysis of the Nordic, and they had 45 transitions since 2019. 2019, the published companies started to engage in acquisitions in Europe and also all over the world. And you see that even if the market is now slowly, we had 7 acquisitions even this year. And the big public companies like Hansa, Inission, Node, Scanfil, and Kitron, they stand for 70% of all acquisitions in this time. This I show here in detail, and what you can see is that they have different strategies. So Hansa, for example, even with this last buy in of the BMK Group this week, they focus a lot on Germany and the Nordic countries. And even Inission only acquired companies in the Nordic countries. But if you have a look on Node has a big acquisition even now at the end of September of the Cashton Group, Defense UK. So they also focusing on UK. They also bought a company in Bulgaria. Scanfil is a little bit more global. They have Germany, Malaysia, USA, Italy, so they look all over the world. And Kitron is also US and Denmark. And to name from the other big Nordic EMS, Evertiq EMS, a Danish company, is also very active. They open also a new site in US now. Due to the toll tariffs, they start something new. I read this week that they have a little bit problems to find the right personnel, the right stuff. They had problems to get the people with knowledge in electronics. And then I also brought you the merchant acquisitions from Poland with me. Or in Eastern Europe, there was not so much movement at now for Eastern Europe. So Vector Blue, they were bought by CMEC, a big Belgian company who has also a production site in UK. And Flex Poland bought the production site of ABB, a big electronic OEM. Inission, also one of the Nordic public companies, bought Zelteka in Lithuania, and the last acquisition now in July was Videoton from Hungary, who bought the German Limtronic. And at the beginning, they only bought a share of 31, and there should be more later on. Okay, this was everything about acquisition. And I think it's also good if we come to an end with the loud there around us.
So, takeaway from our session. So, thankfully, we will be back to a small growth in 2026, which is good. What is important for EMS companies? Well, you need to look at your margins. This needs to be your first priority, of course, with this declining revenues. Actually, as we saw earlier, automotive, dangerous, transitioning business. So please be careful with automotive. Make a decision whether you want to be a player in this growing market of aerospace and defense. There was a lot of M&A activity going on over the last years, so look for M&A opportunities, look for strategic alliances or an M&A, as this is a good option to further participate in the market. And of course, work on strategy, and to work on strategy, use qualified market data for it. Thank you very much.
And I saw that a lot of you took pictures. So if you're interested in the whole presentation, come to us, give us our business card, and we will send you the presentation. Thank you.